A little beggar, desperate to save his sick grandmother, was trying to sell a small toy truck to a man without knowing that he was a millionaire. What the millionaire did next changed everything. The street was teeming with hurried people on that hot afternoon. Tobias, a brown-skinned boy with sad eyes, held the trembling hand of his grandmother, Donna Martha, whose pale face contrasted with the colorful dress she wore. The boy observed every movement of the elderly woman with concern, noticing how her breathing seemed more difficult with each passing hour. Donna Martha urgently needed a medication that was far beyond their financial means, a medicine that could save her life but cost more than they could ever gather. "Grandma, don't worry. I'll find a way to get the money for your medicine." "I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you," whispered Tobias, trying to sound confident while helping his grandmother sit on a bench. Donna Martha tried to smile, but the effort turned into a grimace of pain. Her gnarled fingers caressed her grandson's cheek with tenderness, but her eyes revealed the fear she was trying to hide. Tobias was all she had left since his parents had departed in a tragic accident, and now, ironically, she feared leaving him alone in the world. The disease consuming her was advancing rapidly, and without the right medication, doctors had given little hope. "My little Pedrinho, you shouldn't be here trying to take care of an old woman like me. You should be playing, studying, living your life. It hurts more to know that I'm stealing your childhood than any evil that's consuming my body," lamented Donna Martha, discreetly wiping away a stubborn tear. With the determination of his 9 years, Tobias looked firmly at his grandmother before walking away. In his pocket, the small red truck, the last gift from his parents before the accident, weighed like an anchor of memories. It was his most precious possession, the only tangible connection to the past, but it could also be Donna Martha's salvation. The boy approached an elegant lady walking with shopping bags, gathering all his courage to offer his services. "Ma'am, can I help carry your shopping bags? I'm stronger than I look and I really need to earn some money for my grandmother's medicine, who is very sick," asked Tobias, with a voice that mixed hope and desperation. The woman barely looked at him before quickening her pace, as if poverty were contagious. This was just the first of many rejections that Tobias would face that day. Some people simply ignored him, others made impatient gestures, and there were those who reprimanded him for begging instead of being in school. Each refusal was like a small cut in his hope, but the aged and sick face of Donna Martha, sitting patiently on the bench, was the fuel that prevented him from giving up. "Why doesn't anyone want to help me? I'm not asking for charity, I just want to work to save my grandmother. If my parents were here, they would know what to do. They always had a solution for everything," thought Tobias, fighting against the tears that threatened to fall. After hours of frustrated attempts, Tobias made the most difficult decision. He took the little truck out of his pocket, observing how the red paint, although somewhat worn, still shone in the sun. He remembered the day he received it, his father's smile, his mother's embrace. It was more than a toy, it was a piece of his history. But now, this fragment of the past could be the price of Donna Martha's future. With slightly trembling hands, Tobias began to approach passers-by, offering his treasure for a value he judged to be enough to buy at least a few days of medication. "Please, this truck is very special. It was the last gift from my parents before they died. I need to sell it to buy medicine for my grandmother. She will die if she can't take this medicine, and she's the only family I have left in the world," begged Tobias, raising the toy as if it were a sacred offering. People passed by more and more hurriedly, some looking with pity, others with distrust, but none willing to stop. A middle-aged man even laughed, asking who would buy that piece of old tin. Tobias felt as if each word was a physical blow, but he kept trying. The sun was beginning to set, and with it, the boy's hope was also diminishing. The streetlights were beginning to turn on, creating elongated shadows that seemed to dance around Tobias, like ghosts of his failures. "I can't go back to Grandma with nothing. I can't disappoint the only person who loves me in this world. Maybe if I try a little more, if I go to that group of tourists, or if I lower the price. There has to be someone with a heart in this city," Tobias muttered to himself, feeling his throat tighten with growing despair. Exhausted and discouraged, Tobias finally decided to return to where he had left Donna Martha. The little truck still in his hand seemed to weigh tons. He couldn't sell it, couldn't get any job, couldn't help his grandmother. He was a complete failure. As he approached the bench where he had left her, Tobias felt his heart racing. The bench was empty. Alarmed, his eyes frantically searched for his grandmother's fragile figure until he found her fallen on the ground a few meters away. People walked around, some glancing sideways, but no one stopped to help. "Grandma! Grandma! Please wake up! Someone help me, please. My grandmother is sick. She needs a doctor," shouted Tobias, running and falling to his knees beside Donna Martha's motionless body. Donna Martha's face was even paler, almost bluish, and her lips had a purplish coloration that terrified Tobias. He tried to shake her gently, called her name repeatedly, but she didn't respond. Fear turned into panic when he realized he needed to seek help immediately. He jumped up, the little truck firmly clutched in his hand, and began to run desperately along the sidewalk, screaming for help. His tears blurred his vision, and his heart was beating so hard it seemed about to burst out of his mouth. "She's going to die just like my father and mother, and I'll be alone in this world. Please, God, don't let my grandma die. Take the little truck. Take everything I have, but don't take her," Tobias prayed in his thoughts as he ran. It was in this state of absolute desperation that Tobias didn't see the well-dressed man stepping out of a luxury car parked near the sidewalk. The collision was inevitable. Tobias violently crashed into the stranger, falling backward from the impact. The little truck escaped from his hand and flew through the air, landing with a metallic noise on the stone ground. The sound of breaking pieces was like a stab in the boy's chest. When Tobias managed to compose himself, he saw with horror that his precious treasure, the last physical memento of his parents, was irreparably broken. The wheels had separated from the body, and the metal was twisted in a way that would never return to its original shape. It was as if the last thread connecting him to a happy past had been cut. "No! No! No! My little truck!" It was all I had left of them. It was everything. The words dissolved into uncontrollable sobs as Tobias crawled to collect the broken remains of the toy. The man, visibly irritated by the collision, adjusted his expensive suit and was about to reprimand the boy when he noticed the state Tobias was in. It wasn't just the cry of a child who lost a toy. It was the weeping of someone who had lost everything. Tobias's sobs now echoed through the now emptier sidewalk, drawing curious and uncomfortable glances from the few passers-by still walking by. With the pieces of the truck pressed against his chest, the boy seemed the embodiment of helplessness. His face, stained with tears and dirt, turned to the starry sky, as if seeking some answer or consolation there. "Mom, Dad, please help me. Grandma is dying, my little truck broke, and I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so afraid of being alone in this world. Please send someone to help me," whispered Tobias between sobs, unaware that the man he had bumped into was still there, observing him with an expression that slowly transformed from irritation to concern. The man, who went by the name of Harrison, took a hesitant step toward the boy. There was something in Tobias's genuine pain that pierced the barrier of indifference that Harrison had built over years of business success. The child's sobs seemed to reach a long-forgotten place in his heart, a place that remembered pain, loss, and above all, loneliness. For a moment, Harrison saw himself in that fragile boy, who held the remains of a toy as if they were the shards of his own life. An unsettling feeling that this encounter was not mere coincidence began to grow within him. Harrison had clearly heard the boy say, "Grandma is dying. My little truck broke, and I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so afraid of being alone in this world. Please, send someone to help me." The millionaire moved a little closer, kneeling to be at the boy's height. "Boy, why are you crying like this? It's just an old toy. I can buy you a new one if you want. You're saying your grandmother is dying. Where are your parents?" asked Harrison in a voice that surprised himself by its gentle tone, so different from his usual harshness. His eyes fixed on the boy's as he concluded, "Tell me what's happening." Tears ran down Tobias's dirty face as he looked at the man kneeling in front of him. Something in Harrison's gaze gave him an inexplicable feeling of confidence, despite the fear that still dominated his small body. With trembling hands, Tobias held the broken pieces of the toy truck against his chest, as if they could protect him, while the words began to pour out in a desperate torrent. "My grandmother Martha is very sick, sir. She needs an expensive medicine that we cannot afford. I spent the whole day trying to get money, but nobody would help me. When I returned, she was lying on the floor, not waking up, not moving. My parents died 2 years ago in an accident, and now she is all I have in the world. Please, if you don't help me, she will die like they did and I'll be completely alone, explained Tobias, his voice broken by sobs that seemed to come from the depths of his soul. Harrison felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. The boy's story evoked memories of his own childhood, of difficult times he had tried to bury beneath years of wealth and power. For a moment, he was paralyzed by an emotion he didn't expect to feel, a mix of compassion and guilt for the indifference he had cultivated over the years. Tobias's fragility contrasted drastically with the imposing nature of his Italian suit and his luxury car parked a few meters away. "Where is your grandmother now, Tobias? Take me to her immediately. I have doctors who can help her. I have resources, connections. Don't worry about money or medicine. You don't need to carry this burden alone anymore, understand? From now on, I'm taking responsibility for caring for both of you," declared Harrison, surprising himself with the firmness of his own promise. Tobias looked at Harrison with initial distrust, as he had already been deceived and disappointed many times that day. But the urgency of the situation didn't give him the luxury of prolonged hesitation. With a quick nod, he tucked the remains of the toy truck in his pocket and began running back to where he had left Donna Martha, constantly looking back to ensure Harrison was following him. The street, now almost deserted under the night sky, seemed endless as they ran. "Please, God, don't let it be too late. She has to be alive, she has to be. This man seems important, rich, he can help if there's still time. Please, just this one chance, just this one," murmured Tobias between labored breaths, like a desperate prayer to the universe. When they finally arrived at the location, the sight of Donna Martha still motionless on the ground made Tobias's heart almost stop. A small crowd of onlookers had formed around her, but no one seemed to be actually helping. Harrison pushed the people aside with authority, quickly kneeling beside the elderly woman. His skilled fingers checked for a pulse in Donna Martha's neck, weak but present. Her breathing was almost imperceptible, and the bluish pallor of her skin indicated she was in deep shock. Without wasting a second, Harrison lifted the fragile body of the lady in his arms, surprised by how light she was, as if the disease had consumed all her substance, leaving only a shadow of the person she once had been. "She's still alive, but barely. We need to take her to the hospital immediately or we'll lose her. My car is right over there. It will be faster than waiting for an ambulance. Tobias, don't move away from me for even a second. I promise I'll do everything humanly possible to save her. But we need to act now," ordered Harrison, his voice carrying an urgency that left no room for questions. Tobias ran alongside Harrison, who carried Donna Martha as if she were a child. Each step toward the luxury car seemed like an eternity for the boy, who couldn't take his eyes off his grandmother's motionless face. When they finally reached the vehicle, Harrison carefully placed the elderly woman in the back seat and instructed Tobias to sit beside her, holding her hand. The driver, who until then had been waiting patiently in the car, showed no surprise at seeing his boss return with an unconscious elderly woman and a panicked boy, a sign that discretion was a fundamental part of his job. The powerful engine roared to life, and the car sped through the streets toward the nearest hospital. Throughout the journey, Tobias kept his grandmother's hand between his, as if he could transfer some of his own vitality to her. "Grandma, hang in there. This good man is helping us. Remember how you always said angels appear in the most unexpected moments? I think we found our angel. Please don't give up. Don't leave me. Fight just a little longer. We're almost at the hospital," whispered Tobias in Donna Martha's ear, ignoring the tears that again blurred his vision. The arrival at the hospital was a blur of frantic activity. Before the car had even fully stopped at the emergency entrance, Harrison was already out, carrying Donna Martha and shouting for help. Harrison's name seemed to open doors, literally. Doctors and nurses immediately appeared, bringing a stretcher where Donna Martha was carefully placed. Tobias tried to follow them, but was gently stopped by a nurse who explained that he would need to wait in the waiting room. Panic began to take over the boy again, until he felt Harrison's firm hand on his shoulder. The two watched helplessly as the medical team took Donna Martha into the emergency room, doors closing behind them. The sound of the clock on the waiting room wall seemed to echo painfully in the silence that followed. "They will take good care of her, Tobias, but I need to know more about her condition to better help. What disease does she have? What medicine is it that you cannot afford? I want you to tell me everything, every detail. The more I know, the more I can do, and don't worry about costs. None of that matters now. Understand? What matters is saving your grandmother, Harrison stated, guiding the boy to the most distant seats in the waiting room, where they could talk with some privacy. Tobias took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts as he sat next to Harrison. The emotional and physical exhaustion of the long day began to weigh on his small shoulders, but concern for Donna Martha kept him alert. With a trembling voice, he explained that his grandmother suffered from a serious heart condition that required an imported medication, extraordinarily expensive and difficult to find. The doctors had said that without this treatment, her heart would simply stop working. He also explained how they lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, surviving on Donna Martha's modest pension, which barely covered basic necessities. Each of Tobias's words revealed a world of deprivation and difficulties that contrasted brutally with Harrison's reality. The doctors said she needed urgent treatment, but when we saw the price of the medicine, we realized it was impossible. We sold almost everything we had, but still didn't come close to the necessary amount. My grandmother stopped eating properly to save money. I think that made her even weaker. She always prioritized my needs above hers, always said I was more important than anything. I guess that's why she hid from me how much she was getting worse, so as not to worry me even more, Tobias reported. The guilt evident in every word, as if somehow he was responsible for his grandmother's suffering. While listening attentively, Harrison already had his phone in hand, making consecutive calls in a low but authoritative voice. Names of renowned doctors were mentioned, favors were called in, and Harrison's influence became increasingly evident with each new call. Tobias watched with a mixture of hope and fascination as this stranger, who just an hour ago had bumped into him by chance, now mobilized impressive resources to save his grandmother. After the last call, Harrison put away his phone and turned to Tobias with a determined look. The tension in the businessman's face had been replaced by a strange calm, as if he was finally doing something that really mattered after years wasted accumulating wealth and power. Listen carefully, Tobias. In less than an hour, the best cardiology specialists in this country will be here. I'm having the medication your grandmother needs imported. It will arrive on a private plane tonight. There is no reason for despair now, just faith and patience. Sometimes life puts us in impossible situations just to show us that miracles still happen. And strange as it may seem, I feel that I was placed in your path today for some reason that I don't yet fully understand. Perhaps helping you is a form of redemption for me too, Harrison confided, his voice carrying a rare emotion that would surprise anyone who knew him in business circles. The following hours were the longest in Tobias's life. He and Harrison remained side by side in the waiting room, occasionally exchanging words, but mainly sharing a silence loaded with expectation and fear. Harrison had provided food and water for the boy, realizing that he probably hadn't eaten for hours, but Tobias barely touched the meal, his throat closed by anxiety. From time to time, important-looking doctors arrived at the hospital, respectfully greeted Harrison, and disappeared into the restricted area where Donna Martha was being treated. The unusual movement caught the attention of the hospital staff, who whispered among themselves, trying to understand why so many renowned specialists were converging to attend to an unknown patient in the middle of the night. Around midnight, a helicopter landed on the hospital's helipad. It carried the special medication Harrison had promised. Do you see that helicopter, Tobias? It brings hope for your grandmother. I know it's difficult to wait. I know every minute feels like an eternity when someone we love is suffering. But I want you to know that at this exact moment, your grandmother is receiving the best possible treatment with the best doctors money can buy. I have faith she will overcome this, and when she recovers, we will find a way to ensure you never have to go through something like this again, Harrison assured, as he watched the medication being quickly transported into the hospital. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, a middle-aged doctor with deep circles of fatigue approached them. Tobias immediately stood up, his heart beating so hard it seemed about to leap out of his chest. The doctor looked first at Harrison, then at Tobias, and then, to the immense relief of both, a small smile appeared on his exhausted face. Donna Martha had survived the worst. Her condition was still critical, but she had responded well to the emergency treatment and the special medication. She was now stable, conscious, and had asked for her grandson. The doctor explained that several days of hospitalization, additional tests, and a continuous treatment plan would still be necessary, but the outlook was surprisingly good considering the severity of her initial condition. Tobias felt his legs weaken and would have fallen if Harrison hadn't supported him in time. "Can I see her now? Please, I need to see with my own eyes that she's okay. I need to tell her that I found help, that she'll get better, that she doesn't need to worry about the medicine anymore," Tobias begged, wiping away tears that were now of relief, no longer of despair. The doctor led Tobias and Harrison through the silent hospital corridors to a private room where Donna Martha was resting. The sight of his grandmother connected to various machines, and with tubes and wires all over, initially frightened Tobias, but the weak smile she gave him upon seeing him enter was enough to dispel his fear. Tobias ran to the bedside, carefully taking his grandmother's hand in his, while Harrison respectfully remained a few steps behind, observing the reunion with an emotion he couldn't name or justify. Donna Martha looked as fragile as a little bird, her skin almost translucent against the white hospital sheets, but there was a renewed flame in her eyes. In a hoarse, low voice, she thanked Tobias for not giving up on her, calling him her little hero. When Tobias explained about Harrison and how he had helped, the elderly woman turned her gaze to the businessman, trying to understand what angel was this who had appeared out of nowhere to save them. "God sent you to us at the exact moment, sir. I have no words to thank you for what you did for us. Nothing I can say or do will ever be enough to express my gratitude. You didn't just save my life, but also my grandson's, because without me, what would become of him in this world? Tobias is all I have left. He is my only reason to fight and continue living after losing my daughter and son-in-law so tragically," Donna Martha murmured, silent tears running down her wrinkled face. It was at that moment, as he approached to reassure Donna Martha, ensuring that no thanks were necessary, that Harrison noticed something that made his heart almost stop. A necklace partially hidden under the elderly woman's hospital gown had shifted with her movements. At the end of this necklace hung an ancient medallion with a family crest that Harrison knew intimately well. It was his own family's crest, a symbol he had seen throughout his life in portraits, documents, and jewelry belonging to generations of his ancestors. The shock was so great that Harrison was momentarily speechless, frozen in place, as his mind tried to process what this could mean. The coincidence was impossible. That medallion was unique, made especially for family members, and the last person Harrison knew to possess it besides himself was... No, it couldn't be. But there was the evidence, hanging from the neck of an unknown lady who, by some inexplicable twist of fate, had crossed his path through an orphaned boy and a broken little truck. That necklace. "Mrs. Martha, where did this necklace you're wearing come from? Please, it's very important that you tell me the truth," asked Harrison, his voice almost unrecognizable from contained emotion, eyes fixed on the medallion as if it might disappear at any moment, taking with it the invisible thread that seemed to connect their lives in a way he could never have imagined. The silence that followed Harrison's question seemed almost palpable in the hospital room. Tobias looked confusedly from his grandmother to the man who had saved them, not understanding what was happening. Mrs. Martha, however, looked as if she had seen a ghost. Her skin, already pale due to her illness, acquired an almost translucent tone, while her trembling fingers instinctively sought the medallion, as if wanting to hide it again. The heart monitor beside the bed registered a sudden acceleration of heartbeats, causing Harrison to take a step back, fearing he might cause a relapse. The elderly woman's eyes, previously full of gratitude, now showed a mixture of fear and recognition, as if pieces of an old puzzle were finally beginning to fit together in her mind. This necklace belonged to my mother. It was the only thing I took with me when I left many years ago. How did you recognize it, unless... No, it can't be. Harrison? Harrison, is it you? My little brother Harrison, Mrs. Martha's voice failed on the last sentence, betrayed by the emotion that threatened to suffocate her, as decades of kept secrets seemed about to come to light. Harrison felt his legs weaken, and needed to support himself against the wall to avoid falling. Long-buried memories began to emerge like a whirlwind in his mind. Memories of an older sister, whom he adored, who told him stories at night and protected him from their father's strictness. A sister who disappeared when he was only 8 years old and whose name was forbidden to be mentioned in the family house, as if she had never existed. His father had said she was dead, that she had dishonored the family name, that she was no longer worthy of being part of them. Harrison grew up believing that lie, transforming the pain of loss into relentless ambition to prove his own worth. And now, more than 4 decades later, she was there before him, so fragile and aged that he almost didn't recognize her. But the eyes, those deep brown eyes, were unmistakably the same ones that had given him courage in his moments of childish fear. "Martha? My sister Martha? They told me you had died, that you had run away and met a tragic end. Father forbade us from even speaking your name. I was only 8 when you disappeared, and part of me died that day. How is this possible? All these years you were alive just a few kilometers away, while I believed I had lost you forever," replied Harrison, his voice choked with emotion as he took a hesitant step toward the bed, as if fearing she might disappear again if he got too close. Tobias observed the scene with wide eyes, unable to fully comprehend what was happening. For him, his grandmother had never mentioned having a brother, much less a rich and powerful brother like Harrison. All the stories she told about the past were vague, always focused on how she met and loved Tobias's grandfather, never about her own family. Now, seeing the man who had saved them call her sister, Tobias felt as if he were watching a scene from a surreal movie. The broken toy truck still weighed in his pocket, a tangible reminder of how a simple accident had triggered this extraordinary revelation. Carefully, he moved away from the bed, giving the 2 adults the space they seemed to need to process the shock of reunion. "Grandma, you never told me you had a brother. Why did you keep it a secret? And if he's your brother, that means he's my uncle, Uncle Harrison. Why did you never look for us? Why did you let Grandma suffer so much if you had so much money to help?" The questions came out in a confused torrent, revealing the innocence and simple logic of a child unable to comprehend the complexities of adult relationships and the chasms that time and circumstances can create between people who were once close. Tears now ran freely down Mrs. Martha's wrinkled face. With effort, she extended her hand to Harrison, who hesitated only for a moment before taking it in his. The touch seemed to break an invisible barrier, and Harrison fell to his knees beside the bed, as if the weight of decades of separation finally became unbearable. "Mrs." Martha turned to Tobias, her eyes pleading for understanding as she began to reveal secrets kept for almost half a century. She explained that she was born into an extremely traditional and wealthy family, where appearances and social status were valued above everything, even love. When she was 20, she met and fell in love with a young musician of humble origins, Tobias's grandfather. Her father, a cruel man obsessed with social position, forbade the relationship, but she defied his authority and continued to see the young man in secret. When she discovered she was pregnant, she confessed everything to her family, hoping they would accept her choice given the fait accompli. "That night, your grandfather offered me his heart and a simple but honest life full of love. And I chose that instead of the empty riches of my family. When I told my father about the pregnancy, he flew into a rage like I had never seen before. He gave me 2 options: either abandon the baby and the man I loved, marrying someone from our social circle, or be disinherited and expelled from the family forever, considered dead to all of them. I didn't hesitate for even a second. I chose your grandfather and your mother who was growing inside me. That same night, I took only a few clothes and this medallion that had belonged to my mother and left never to return. The most painful part was leaving you behind, my little brother Harrison. You were just a child whom I loved with all my heart, but I had no choice. I couldn't take you with me into that uncertain life I chose for love." Harrison listened to the account with a mixture of horror and fascination, the pieces of his own childhood beginning to make sense in this new light. He remembered the oppressive silence that settled in the mansion after Martha's disappearance, how his father became even colder and more controlling, how his mother seemed to have lost any trace of joy she once possessed. He grew up in that toxic environment, shaped by fear and the desperate need for approval, gradually transforming into the type of man his father would admire, ruthless in business, emotionally distant, obsessed with power and status. He married not for love but for convenience, a woman from an equally influential family, and they had a daughter, Adelaide, to whom Harrison, perpetuating the cycle, never knew how to properly show affection. And now before him was not only the sister he believed he had lost, but also living proof that a different choice was possible, a choice based on love, not duty or appearances. For all these years, I lived a lie. Father told us you had run away with a vagabond and ended up dead in some miserable alley, that this was what happened to women who dishonored their families. I believed him, Martha. I transformed the pain of your loss into fuel to become exactly the kind of man he wanted me to be. Cold, calculating, obsessed with money and power. I wasted my life trying to fill the void you left with things that never really mattered. And worst of all, I became so similar to him that I didn't even notice the monster I had become until this exact moment, looking at you and at this boy who is blood of my blood. Tobias observed the reunion with a mixture of confusion and fascination. It was strange to think that this powerful man was in fact part of his family, an uncle he never knew existed. Even stranger was seeing his grandmother, always so reserved about her past, revealing such deep and painful secrets. The words she had always used to describe her life before Tobias's birth had been vague and evasive, as if that part of her history was a closed book that no one had permission to open. Now the pages of that book were being revealed, and Tobias didn't know how to process all the new information. He looked at the broken remains of his little truck, now an involuntary symbol of how fate works in mysterious ways. If he hadn't bumped into Harrison, if the toy hadn't broken, perhaps this reunion would never have happened, and his grandmother might have died without ever having the chance for reconciliation. So you really are my real uncle, my grandmother's brother? And does this mean I have more family besides her? This is the most amazing thing that's ever happened to me, besides saving Grandma, of course. For years I felt so alone, even with Grandma. At school parties, when the other boys had parents, mothers, uncles, cousins, I only had her. Now I have an uncle. I have a rich uncle. But if you're this rich, why did you let Grandma live in hardship? Why did you never look for us? Didn't you understand that she was your family too? The innocence and frankness of Tobias's questions hit Harrison like a punch to the stomach. There was no simple or comfortable answer to offer, just the harsh truth that he never looked for Martha, because he believed his father's lie, because he allowed pride and resentment to define his actions, because he became complicit in the isolation of his own sister. Donna Martha, noticing Harrison's discomfort, gently intervened, explaining to Tobias that families sometimes lose each other not for lack of love, but due to circumstances beyond their control. She said that Harrison couldn't have helped because he believed she was dead, just as she never tried to contact him because she feared he was still under the influence of their tyrannical father. The years turned into decades, and with time the chasm between them seemed insurmountable. Don't blame your uncle, Tobias. It's not his fault nor mine. These are the choices we make when we're young, and the consequences we carry for the rest of our lives. I chose love and freedom, even if it meant poverty and hardship. Harrison was left behind, an innocent child in the hands of a man who didn't know how to love, only to control. We were both victims of different circumstances. But what matters now is that somehow, after all this time, fate has brought us together. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's not too late to rebuild what was lost, to be the family we should have been from the beginning. Harrison wiped away tears with the back of his hand, a gesture so human and vulnerable that it drastically contrasted with the imposing and controlled figure he projected to the world. For a moment, he seemed to have regressed to that 8-year-old boy who lost the sister he adored, desperately seeking a way back home. Then, as if a monumental decision had been made within him, Harrison stood up and looked at Martha and Tobias with renewed determination. His eyes, previously clouded by emotion, now shone with a clear purpose. He couldn't change the past, couldn't recover the lost years, but he could shape the future. He could ensure that his sister would never again be in need, that his nephew would receive all the opportunities he deserved, that the cycle of pain and separation would finally break with this generation. Martha, Tobias, I cannot undo the mistakes of the past, nor make up for all the years we lost, but I can offer a new beginning, a chance to be the family we should have been. I want you to come live with me as soon as you're discharged, Martha. My house is more than enough for all of us, and you'll receive the best medical care. Tobias will have access to the best education, the best resources. It's not charity, it's responsibility. It's what I should have done decades ago if I had known the truth. Please allow me to do this. Allow me to be the brother and uncle I never had the chance to be. I know it's a huge change, that I'm asking you to leave behind the life you've built, but I promise you'll never again have to worry about money, medicine, or any material need. More importantly, you'll never be alone again. We'll do this together, as a true family. Tobias felt a wave of excitement course through his body at Harrison's proposal. He imagined what it would be like to live in a mansion, attend an elite school, never again worry if there would be enough food in the pantry or if his grandmother would have money to buy the necessary medicines. It was as if all his most impossible dreams were suddenly within reach. However, part of him also felt fear of the unknown, anxiety about this new world that Harrison offered. His small house on the outskirts of town was modest, often cold in winter and hot in summer, but it was the only home he had known since his parents' death. It was where he kept the few memories he had of them, where every corner brought a story, a moment shared with Donna Martha. Moving to Harrison's mansion would mean leaving all this behind, embarking on a completely new and unknown journey. Grandma, what do you think? Could we really go live with Uncle Harrison? Would we have a big room and I could continue studying, right? I'm afraid to leave our house, to leave behind Mom and Dad's things. But I'm also afraid of you getting sick again and not having money for medicine. And if we went to live with Uncle Harrison, he could always help if you got worse, right? He has doctors and medicines and everything we need, but it's still strange, isn't it? He was a stranger until a few hours ago, and now he's our family. Donna Martha looked at her grandson tenderly, perfectly understanding his doubts and fears. She herself was torn between gratitude for Harrison's generous offer and the natural apprehension of someone who had lived decades of independence, however precarious it might have been. Moving to her brother's mansion would mean not just a new address, but a complete revolution in her way of life, in her identity. However, looking at the heart monitor beside her bed, Martha was also painfully aware of her own fragility. Her condition, even with proper treatment, would require constant care, regular medication, and an appropriate environment for her recovery, things she could never provide for herself in her humble home. More importantly, there was Tobias to consider. The boy deserved more than a perpetually sick grandmother and a life of deprivation. He deserved the education, opportunities, and support that only Harrison could offer. After considering all these factors, Martha extended a trembling hand to her brother and another to her grandson, symbolically uniting them. Harrison, I accept your offer, not for myself, but for Tobias. This boy has already lost too much in life, and if there's a chance to give him the stability and opportunities he deserves, I have no right to refuse. As for the memories, Tobias, they aren't in the walls of our house or in the few possessions we have. They're here in our hearts. We'll take the most important objects of your parents, those that hold special meaning for you. And perhaps with time, creating new memories with your uncle will also be a way to honor the past while building a different future. It won't be easy. It will be a big change for all of us. But I believe that, together, we can make it work. Decision made, Harrison immediately began making the necessary arrangements. He instructed his team to prepare rooms in the mansion, contacted the best cardiology specialists to develop a continuous treatment plan for Martha, and even began researching the best schools for Tobias. His mind, trained for efficiency and problem-solving, transformed the reconstruction of his newly discovered family into a mission with the same determination he usually applied to the most important business dealings. The difference this time was the genuine emotion behind each call, each order given. He explained to the doctors that Martha would remain hospitalized until she was strong enough for the transfer, and that as soon as she was discharged, she would be taken directly to his residence, where a nursing team would be on standby. As for Tobias, Harrison insisted that the boy should go to the mansion that very night, to become familiar with the new environment and rest properly after the emotional trauma of the past few hours. Don't worry, Martha. Tobias will be perfectly fine in my home. I have enough staff to ensure he has everything he needs, and he can visit you here at the hospital every day until your discharge. As for your current home, I'll send people to collect the belongings you wish to keep, especially objects with sentimental value. Nothing will be left behind or discarded without your approval. As for the rest, we can decide later if you wish to keep it as a place to visit occasionally or if you prefer to sell it. There's no rush for that decision. The important thing now is to focus on your recovery and ensuring that Tobias feels safe and comfortable. And please don't think of this as charity. Think of it as a late restitution, as an attempt to correct, albeit imperfectly, a terrible mistake made many years ago. While the three of them talked, elaborating plans for this unexpected shared future, the door to the room abruptly opened. An elegant young woman, with features vaguely reminiscent of Harrison's, entered with an expression of irritation and concern. She wore expensive clothes and had a posture that betrayed privilege and impatience. It was Adelaide, Harrison's only daughter, who had been informed by one of the drivers about the strange situation involving her father, an elderly woman in the hospital, and an unknown boy. Unable to make direct contact with Harrison, whose phone had been turned off for hours, she decided to go to the hospital personally to find out what was happening. Her gaze quickly passed over Tobias, then over Donna Martha in the bed, before finally fixing on her father, silently demanding an explanation for that unusual scene. The shock on her face intensified when she noticed the intimacy with which Harrison held the elderly woman's hand, the evident emotional connection between them, something she had rarely witnessed in relation to any person, including herself. "Father? What's going on here? I've been trying to call you all night. I got home and they said you had taken a stranger to the hospital and then sent for specialists from all over the country. Who are these people? And why do you look so different? Were you crying? I've never seen you cry before, not even when Mother died. What's happening? Who are they to you?" Her voice contained a note of accusation, but also genuine confusion and perhaps a hint of jealousy at the evident emotional connection she was witnessing. The room plunged into silence again, the palpable tension between father and daughter creating an almost suffocating atmosphere. Harrison looked at Adelaide, then at Martha and Tobias, aware that the moment had come to face not only the past, but also the implications this family reunion would have for the future. His daughter, raised with all material privileges but little genuine affection, already showed signs of the emotional detachment he himself had cultivated for so many years. How could he explain to her that the people she considered strangers were, in fact, her direct family? How could he make her understand the magnitude of the revelation he had just experienced, the internal transformation occurring in his hardened heart? How could he introduce the idea that her home, her sanctuary of immaculate luxury and perfect order, would soon be inhabited by unknown relatives whose existence she had never suspected? Harrison took a deep breath, recognizing that this was just the first of many challenges he would face on the path to reintegrating his fragmented family. But for the first time in decades, he felt he was doing something truly meaningful, something that transcended the accumulation of wealth and power. "Adelaide, I want you to meet your Aunt Martha, my older sister whom I haven't seen in over 40 years, and your cousin Tobias, my nephew. They are our family, blood of our blood, and they will live with us from now on. I know this seems surprising and confusing, and I promise to explain everything in detail later. But at this moment, I need you to understand something fundamental. I found the part of me that was lost for almost my entire life, and it has changed everything. Nothing will be as before, and this, my daughter, is the best thing that could have happened to our family." Harrison's mansion was exactly as one might imagine, imposing, elegant, and intimidating. When the car passed through the ornate gates and followed the long circular driveway, Tobias couldn't suppress a sigh of admiration. Perfectly manicured gardens extended on all sides, with fountains and sculptures strategically positioned to create an impression of calculated wealth. The main building, with its majestic columns and tall windows, seemed to come straight out of a fairy tale that Donna Martha used to read to Tobias before bedtime. It was hard to believe that soon this palace would be his new home. Harrison carefully observed his nephew's reactions in the rearview mirror, feeling a strange mixture of pride and shame. Pride for the empire he had built, shame for the abyss it represented between his life and that of his newly discovered family. Adelaide remained silent in the passenger seat, her fingers impatiently drumming against the door, as if every second in that car suffocated her. "It's so big, Uncle Harrison. It looks like a real castle. Grandma will love it when she leaves the hospital. She always said that one day we would have a house with a garden, but I never imagined something like this. Is this really where we're going to live? All of us? Forever?" Tobias's voice was full of childlike admiration, but also uncertainty, as if he feared that this new reality might evaporate at any moment, like a dream too good to be true. The first days in the mansion were marked by palpable discomfort. Adelaide avoided common areas when Tobias was present, retreating more and more to her own room, or going out for long hours with friends. Harrison divided his time between visits to the hospital, where Donna Martha continued her treatment, and awkward attempts to make Tobias feel at home. The boy, in turn, wandered through the immense corridors and halls decorated with expensive art, like an explorer in unknown territory, trying not to touch anything that looked valuable, which meant practically everything. The household staff, always discreet and efficient, observed with contained curiosity this strange dynamic developing between the powerful boss, his distant daughter, and the boy of humble origin who was suddenly introduced as a family member. Harrison had given specific instructions that Tobias should be treated with the same respect as any family member, but this only increased the boy's discomfort, unaccustomed to having people at his disposal for any need. "I don't know how to behave here, Uncle. Everything is so beautiful and expensive that I'm afraid of breaking something. The food is served on so many different plates, and there are so many people watching me all the time. In our house it was just Grandma and me, and now there are employees everywhere asking if I need anything. I feel like I'm in a completely different world, as if I had crossed over to another planet where I don't know the rules." The situation with Adelaide was even more delicate. Accustomed to being the center of her father's attention, even if that attention was often distant and conditional, the young woman saw Tobias's arrival as a direct threat. The looks of pride that Harrison directed at his nephew when the boy made an intelligent observation or demonstrated a hidden talent were painfully familiar to Adelaide, but also painfully rare in her own experience. During a particularly tense dinner, when Harrison announced he was looking for the best schools for Tobias, Adelaide finally exploded. She accused her father of neglecting his own daughter in favor of a nephew he hadn't even known for 2 weeks, questioned the veracity of the whole story, and went so far as to suggest that perhaps Martha and Tobias were imposters trying to take advantage of the family's wealth. Her eyes shone with tears of anger and hurt when she finally left the table, leaving an oppressive silence in her wake. Tobias, completely mortified, shrank in his chair, wishing he could disappear. "I didn't want to cause problems between you, Uncle. Maybe it would be better for us to return to our house when Grandma leaves the hospital. I don't want your daughter to suffer because of us. We're already so grateful for everything you've done, saving Grandma, helping with the medications. We don't need to live here and create more division in your family. Grandma always says that the most important thing is peace in the house where we live, and it's clear that our presence has taken the peace from here." The arrival of Donna Martha at the mansion, a week after the incident with Adelaide, marked a subtle but significant turning point. There was a quiet dignity in the way the elderly woman carried herself, even fragile and dependent on constant medical care. Born in that same environment of privilege, Martha brought with her an instinctive understanding of how to navigate the social codes of wealth, but also a simplicity and authenticity that decades of modest living had cultivated. Observing the uncomfortable interaction between Harrison, Adelaide, and Tobias, she decided to take upon herself the responsibility of smoothing over the tensions. One afternoon, while sitting in the garden, she called Adelaide for a conversation. The young woman initially hesitated, but something in the serene expression of her newly discovered aunt eventually convinced her. For hours the two talked, Martha sharing stories about Harrison's childhood, revealing a side of her father that Adelaide had never known, and also patiently listening to her niece's frustrations about growing up with an emotionally distant father. There were no major twists or dramatic reconciliations, just the beginning of a mutual understanding, as delicate as the first buds in spring. You know, Adelaide, your father is a product of the same environment that destroyed my youth. Your grandfather didn't know how to love, only to control and demand. Harrison learned to bury his emotions because it was the only way to survive in that house after I left. I'm not defending the way he treated you all these years, just helping you understand. Sometimes understanding the why is the first step to healing old wounds. And perhaps, just perhaps, Tobias's presence in this house is an opportunity for all of you to learn a new way of being family. The true transformation began a month after Martha's arrival at the mansion. On a rainy afternoon, Adelaide was passing through the hallway when she heard sobs coming from Tobias's room. The boy was sitting on the floor, surrounded by memories of his parents, trying unsuccessfully to put together the pieces of a broken toy truck that Harrison had promised to fix. Something in that image, the vulnerability and loss, touched Adelaide deeply. Without hesitation, she entered the room and sat beside him, gently taking the toy in her hands. "My father was always terrible at fixing things," she commented casually. "When I was little, my mother fixed my toys. She taught me some tricks. Would you like me to try to fix it for you? Meanwhile, you could tell me about your parents. They must have been very special people to raise someone as brave as you." An unexpected friendship blossomed between Adelaide and Tobias in the following weeks. What began with fixing the toy truck transformed into study afternoons, where Adelaide discovered that the boy had extraordinary intelligence, only he had never had access to an adequate education. She began to help him with lessons, preparing him for the interview at the prestigious school that Harrison had chosen. Adelaide, who had always lived surrounded by people interested only in her social position and wealth, found in Tobias something rare and precious, genuine admiration and unconditional affection. The boy looked at her as a kind of heroine, absorbing every word, every piece of advice, every story she shared. In turn, Tobias brought to Adelaide's life a simplicity and joy that she had lost long ago, immersed in empty social competitions and superficial relationships. Harrison observed this growing closeness with a mixture of relief and admiration, realizing that perhaps his daughter was finding through Tobias the path to a richer and more authentic emotional life. "I never imagined you could be so patient as a teacher, Adelaide. You explain things in a way that makes everything seem so simple and interesting. At my previous school, I found classes so boring that I often preferred to stay home helping Grandma. But with you, it's different. You make me feel smart, capable. I hope that when I start at the new school, you'll continue helping me, because I think I'm going to need it a lot. It's a completely new world for me, and I'm afraid of not being good enough, of embarrassing you all." Harrison's transformation was also remarkable. The cold, calculating businessman began giving way to someone more present, more attentive to the emotional needs of his reconstructed family. He started coming home earlier, participating in family dinners, taking a genuine interest in Adelaide and Tobias's daily lives. Martha's presence functioned as a kind of moral anchor, constantly and silently reminding him of the type of person he had chosen not to become decades ago when he accepted his father's cold, emotional legacy. Now in middle age, Harrison seemed determined to rewrite that legacy, to create a new story for his family, based on values he had neglected for so long. Love, acceptance, presence. He began to personally involve himself in Tobias's education, not just providing material resources, but sharing knowledge, experiences, family stories that had been buried under decades of silence. One night, sitting in the study while reviewing family history for Tobias's school project, Harrison surprised himself with tears in his eyes upon realizing the time lost and the precious second chance he had received. "You know, Tobias, I spent most of my life believing that success meant accumulating wealth and power, impressing people who, deep down, didn't care about me. It took a 9-year-old boy bumping into me, breaking a toy truck, for me to understand what really matters. Life has a strange way of teaching us its most valuable lessons, often through the most unexpected losses and encounters. I hope you grow up being wiser than I was, recognizing early on that families, not business empires, are the true legacy we leave in this world." The day Tobias received news of his acceptance with a full scholarship to the prestigious school was a day of celebration in the mansion. Not only had he been accepted, But the examiners were so impressed with his natural intelligence and determination that they guaranteed his place with all costs covered, regardless of Harrison's influence. It was a validation that the boy desperately needed, confirmation that his worth went beyond being the nephew of a powerful man, that he had his own merits worthy of recognition. The impromptu party that followed was intimate, just the family gathered in the living room, but filled with an authentic joy those walls had probably never witnessed before. Martha, now considerably recovered, though still fragile, observed the scene with teary eyes, her grandson celebrated, her relationship with her brother restored, a sense of belonging she had abandoned all hope of experiencing again in this life. Adelaide, surprising everyone and perhaps herself, was the one who organized the small celebration, decorating the room with balloons and personally preparing Tobias's favorite cake, following Martha's careful instructions. "I'm so proud of you, cousin. When I told my friends about your admission test scores, nobody believed it. You broke records, did you know? And you did it even though you've studied in much simpler schools all your life. That shows how extraordinary you are. I have as much to learn from you as you do from me. This house was so empty, so quiet before you arrived. Now, it finally feels like a real home. I think I'm beginning to understand what it really means to be part of a family." Months after the casual encounter on the street, life in the mansion had found a new balance. Donna Martha, although still requiring regular medical care, had recovered much of her vitality. The doctors spoke of a miraculous recovery, but Martha knew the true miracle wasn't medical, but emotional. The healing of old wounds, the reunion with her lost brother, the security of seeing her grandson thriving and happy. Tobias adapted surprisingly well to the new school, where his natural intelligence flourished, with access to quality educational resources. Initially shy and insecure among peers from privileged backgrounds, he soon earned respect for his integrity and unique perspective on life. Harrison, observing his nephew overcome challenges and forge his own path, found an unexpected source of pride and inspiration. He began reassessing his own priorities, delegating more responsibilities in his businesses to dedicate time to the family he had almost lost. As for Adelaide, the transformation was perhaps the most profound. The young woman who previously defined herself by her social position and appearances found in Tobias and Martha models of authenticity and resilience that she began incorporating into her own identity. On Tobias's birthday, she prepared a special surprise. The toy truck, completely restored, not merely repaired, but meticulously rebuilt by a specialized craftsman she had secretly sought out. "This little truck isn't just a toy, Tobias. It's a symbol of how fate works in mysterious ways. If it hadn't broken that day, perhaps we would never have met, never formed this unlikely and wonderful family. Broken things aren't always tragedies. Sometimes they're just the universe making room for something new to be born, something more beautiful and complete than we could imagine before. Like this toy, our family was broken, in pieces. Now we're restored, stronger at the seams, carrying the marks of our stories, but whole again." On a quiet Sunday afternoon, the family gathered in the garden for an outdoor lunch, a recently established tradition that everyone had come to value. The table had been set under the shade of a centennial tree, with the elegant simplicity that Martha had brought to the house, tempering ostentatious luxury with touches of authenticity and coziness. The food, a mixture of family recipes Martha had preserved through the years and sophisticated dishes prepared by the mansion's chef, perfectly symbolized the fusion of the two realities that now coexisted harmoniously. Tobias animatedly shared about a scientific project he was developing at school, his eyes shining with the enthusiasm of someone who had discovered his passion. Adelaide listened attentively, occasionally offering suggestions or asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest. Martha and Harrison exchanged complicit glances, like siblings sharing a precious secret, the knowledge of how fragile and precious is the web that unites a family, how easily it can be broken, and how miraculous it is when restored. As he observed the scene, Harrison reflected on the extraordinary journey they had traveled in such a short time. From imminent tragedy to unexpected reconciliation, from casual encounter to rebuilding bonds that seemed irretrievably lost. His gaze rested on the little red truck that Tobias proudly kept displayed on a shelf in his room. No longer a toy to use, but a talisman, a tangible reminder of the transformative power of destiny, love, and forgiveness. Looking at all of you now, I realize I've spent my entire life searching in the wrong place. I built fortunes, established companies, gained power and influence, believing that this would fill the emptiness I felt. But the true wealth was here all along, in the family I lost and found again, in bonds that can stretch across time and space without ever completely breaking. The real miracle wasn't saving Martha that night, but rather she and Tobias saving us, Adelaide and me, from a life of superficial connections and closed hearts. If there's something I've learned in these months, it's that it's never too late to begin again, to open your heart, to build the kind of life that really matters in the end. Did you like Tobias and Harrison's story? Then subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment where you're watching from. Oh, and there's another story waiting for you here on screen. Click there and I'll be waiting for you. The millionaire forced the sick grandmother to marry a beggar to get rid of her. On the wedding day, everyone was shocked by the secret the beggar revealed. The smell of melted butter mingled with the light aroma of vanilla as Martha tried for the third time to keep the bowl steady between her trembling arms. The kitchen was spacious and luxurious, but offered her no comfort. She knew exactly where each spoon was, even though her hands, now fragile and slow, no longer obeyed with precision. She tried to follow the recipe by heart, the same one she used to make when Gregory was little. She wanted to please him with that cake, perhaps remind him that she was still capable of doing something good. As she carefully stirred the batter, the spoon slipped and fell with a clatter to the floor. She paused, took a deep breath, and whispered to herself, with a smile that tried to hide her fatigue, "Your favorite cake will still come out perfect, my boy. You'll see, Gregory will still smile at me." From upstairs, firm footsteps descended the stairs. Gregory entered the kitchen wearing an impeccable dark suit, already ready for work, his gaze cold as always. He observed his grandmother trying to clean the floor and, without approaching, just crossed his arms and sighed loudly. "This again? You need to accept that you can't do these things anymore, Martha. You'll end up breaking everything." She looked at him, trying not to be shaken, but her eyes betrayed her sadness. "It was just a spoon, dear. I just wanted to make your vanilla cake, like on your birthdays." Gregory turned away and went to the coffee maker. "You insist on this as if it would please me. You're just making my life difficult, that's all." That night, the dinner table was set with all the care she could still manage. Aligned napkins, crystal glasses shining under the chandelier light, and in the center a simple cake, somewhat crooked, but made with effort. Gregory sat down, and before she could place a piece on his plate, her hands trembled and the glass of juice toppled onto the white tablecloth. The liquid spread quickly, and the crack of the glass hitting the floor made Martha freeze. Gregory rose abruptly, unable to contain his anger. "This is why I avoid dinners here. Every time the same thing. You need to stop insisting on this. It's embarrassing." Martha tried to collect the shards, even with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry, it was nervousness. I just wanted us to be together." He interrupted her, his gaze fixed on the scattered pieces. "Don't you realize that you suffocate me?" Later, alone in his office, Gregory stared fixedly at the unlit fireplace. The portrait of his deceased parents on the shelf seemed to judge him in silence. He massaged his temples, trying to dispel the pain that spread from his chest to his shoulders. "She reminds me of you all the time. I can't take it anymore," he muttered, staring into the void. He took a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. "I wasn't made to take care of anyone, least of all her. This was never my choice." The photo of his smiling mother with Martha in the background seemed to contradict everything he said. He squeezed his eyes shut, breathed deeply, and said in a low voice, "But I'm the only one left, aren't I?" Before we begin, comment where you're watching this story from, and subscribe to the channel to keep following. The next morning, Gregory walked hurriedly through the glass corridors of the company headquarters. He stopped in front of Jacob's office door and entered without knocking. His partner, with a firm gaze and discreet clothes, was finishing reviewing reports. Gregory threw himself into the armchair in front of the desk and let out an exaggerated sigh. "I can't live like this anymore. Every night is a mess. She needs care that I can't provide." Jacob closed the folder and stared at him unhurriedly. "You're talking about your grandmother. Martha has always been strong. She just needs affection, not a nursing home. Gregory shook his head, impatient. She needs peace. And so do I. What I'm thinking might solve it for both of us. Jacob leaned back in his chair, suspicious. What are you implying, Gregory? Don't tell me you're considering abandoning her. His tone was alert, as if already anticipating the answer. Gregory ran his hand through his dark hair, irritated. It's not that. Putting her in a home would be cruel, I know, but what if she got married? To someone else, someone who would take care of her. Then the responsibility wouldn't be mine anymore. Jacob frowned. Are you serious? That sounds insensitive. She's your grandmother, for God's sake. Gregory laughed dryly, standing up. Sensitivity doesn't pay bills, Jacob. I need a practical solution, and I already know exactly who can help me with this. As he left Jacob's office, Gregory walked decisively to the garage, where his driver was waiting. Inside the car, he typed something on his phone and, with his gaze fixed on the window, muttered almost to himself, "She'll have company and I'll have peace. Everyone wins." Across town, he had already sent for someone very specific, someone who would have no reason to refuse a tempting offer. As the car accelerated, Gregory closed his eyes for a moment. It will be better this way. I just need to organize everything before Jacob tries to interfere with me. That same afternoon, Martha was sitting on the back porch, a blanket over her shoulders and a notebook in her lap. She was drawing simple shapes of cakes and pastries, as she used to do when she was young. An old dream, still alive in her head. I just wanted to open a small bakery, just to spend my days smiling again. But Gregory never has time to hear about it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly wiped them with the back of her hand. He has a good heart. It's just hidden under a lot of pain. She sighed, looking at the clear sky. Maybe one day, he'll see that I just want to be part of his life. Meanwhile, Gregory returned to the mansion with heavy steps and a serious expression. He found Martha still on the porch and approached without sitting down. "You're going to have a visitor tomorrow, someone who might like your cakes." She smiled, trying to disguise the tremor in her cup. "Really? That would make me so happy. I could make my apple pie some. Do you remember it?" He looked away. "I'm not interested in the pie. Just prepare yourself for a conversation." "It will be important." Martha nodded, even without understanding. "All right, dear, I'll get ready. It will be good to have someone new around here." Upon going up to his room, Gregory entered the closet and took off his jacket forcefully, as if he were getting rid of a burden. He opened a secret drawer where he kept old contracts and removed an envelope. Inside was already the commitment contract he had discreetly ordered to be drafted. As soon as the marriage happens, he gets the check, and I go on with my life. He put everything away and closed the drawer, then looked at himself in the mirror. It's just a plan, a simple plan, and she doesn't even need to know the details. He took a deep breath, adjusting his shirt cuffs. A new life for her, a free life for me. In the silence of Martha's room, she was still looking at the cake drawings. She ran her fingers over the scribbles as if they were real. She felt calmer, as if something was about to change. Maybe tomorrow will be a new beginning, maybe. Just maybe Gregory will see me with different eyes. The gentle wind swayed the curtains, and she slowly closed the notebook with a serene smile. Whoever this visitor is, I hope they like sweets, because I still have a lot of love to give. She turned off the light and remained silent, while Gregory, on the other side of the house, looked at the contract spreadsheet on his laptop without any remorse. Everything under control. No emotions, no complications. Tomorrow she will start a new life, and so will I. The sun had not yet reached the top of the buildings when Gregory crossed the company lobby with hurried steps and a cold look. In his hands, a sealed envelope and the contract he had drafted the night before. He entered his office, made a call, and ordered someone to locate a specific man. He gave no name, only the description and the place where he was always sitting, in the vicinity of the company, near the back alley. While waiting, he adjusted the terms in the document with surgical care, as if it were a common financial transaction. Everything needs to be in order. He comes in, signs, and disappears after the ceremony. "Quick, clean, effective," he muttered as he sealed the envelope. "She gets companionship, I gain freedom. A fair deal." About an hour later, the glass door of the office opened, and a man of simple appearance, worn clothes and mismatched shoes, entered with hesitant steps. Harry observed the space with attentive, suspicious eyes. like someone who is sure he doesn't belong in that place. The gleaming marble, leather armchairs, aligned paintings on the walls. Everything screamed luxury and detachment. Gregory didn't stand up, just gestured for the visitor to approach the desk. Harry sat down slowly, still silent, waiting for explanations. Gregory pulled out the contract and placed it on the table. "I want to make you a proposal. You don't need to do anything beyond attending a ceremony and taking care of a lady. In exchange, you'll receive good money." Harry frowned, leaning back in the chair. "Why would someone like you choose someone like me?" Gregory showed no emotional reaction, just adjusted the pen on the contract and indicated the blank space. "It's not for you. It's for her. My grandmother needs companionship, someone to take on this role and release me from this obligation. I don't want institutionalization. I just want someone to stay with her." Harry looked at the papers cautiously, read one or two clauses, but didn't seem convinced. "And what does she think about this?" Gregory shook his head dryly. "She doesn't need to know the details. She'll believe you appeared by chance, fell in love, and after the marriage you can do whatever you want as long as you keep her close." Harry let out a heavy sigh, crossing his arms. "I've never been one to deceive anyone, but I'm tired of sleeping on the cold ground. If this is what will get me off the street," Gregory interrupted him coldly, "then accept it, and don't mess it up." The two remained silent for a moment, until Harry took the pen with trembling, hesitant fingers and signed his name on the contract. Gregory pulled the papers back and stored them in the envelope. Then he extended his hand in a dry gesture. "You will show up at the house tomorrow. I'll tell her you're an old family acquaintance. Be polite, avoid exaggerations. And remember, payment will only be made after the wedding." Harry shook his hand firmly, staring at Gregory with an expression that mixed uncertainty and dignity. "I don't usually lie, but I understand the game. I just hope the lady isn't just another victim of convenience." Gregory stood up and was already walking to the door. "Play your part right, and this won't be a problem." That night, Gregory arrived home and found Martha in the garden, delicately trimming flowers. She saw him from afar and smiled, despite the slowness in her movements. He approached without sitting down, still with his blazer on his shoulders. "I have news for you. Tomorrow someone very special will come to visit you." Martha, surprised, wiped her hands on her apron and looked at him with curiosity. "A visitor? Oh, Gregory, could it be someone from my old school? Or someone from the family?" He laughed, a brief laugh without warmth. "No, but it's someone who will change your routine. Think of it as a pleasant surprise." Martha looked at him with hope in her eyes. "Is it about the pastry shop? Have you finally thought about helping me with my dream?" Gregory turned his face and let out a dry laugh. "With your condition? You can barely hold a spoon. A pastry shop doesn't go well with tremors, grandmother." Martha lowered her gaze, returning to tend to the flowers. He observed her for a few seconds, then entered the house, satisfied with having given a clear answer. The old idea of the pastry shop irritated him more than he would like to admit. In the office, he took the signed contract, folded it carefully, and stored it in the desk drawer. He sat down and opened his laptop to review his schedule. Everything goes as planned. The wedding will be discreet, symbolic, and with luck, she will be occupied enough to forget about me. Still with his eyes on the screen, he muttered to himself, "I offered dignity, shelter, and companionship, better than any nursing home." In the company office the next morning, Jacob was entering with a stack of papers when he ran into Gregory, who was meticulously analyzing contracts. Sitting down without asking permission, Jacob placed the documents on the desk and stared at his partner with silent disapproval. Gregory raised his eyes, impatient. "Any problem?" Jacob pulled up a chair and responded directly. "I heard comments about a strange movement yesterday. They said you had a man from the street brought into the building." Gregory leaned back in his chair, not denying it. "And if I did? It was a personal matter. It's resolved." Jacob frowned, crossing his arms. "You're plotting something, Gregory, and I fear you'll regret it." Gregory stood up and went to the window, observing the movement of cars below. "Jacob, you always try to play the role of moral conscience. But the truth is that my grandmother is in decline, and nobody besides me cares." Jacob stood up too, his tone firmer. "That doesn't justify deceiving her, nor paying a stranger to pretend to have a role in her life." Gregory turned with a cynical smile. "It won't be pretending if she believes it, and in the end everyone wins. She gets affection. I get peace. Jacob approached slowly, placing his hands on the desk. You're about to cross a line of no return, and when you cross it, I want to see if you'll be able to sleep at night. The rest of the morning was filled with silence. Jacob left the office, visibly displeased. Gregory alone took the envelope with the signed contract and looked fixedly at the written name. Harry, a man invisible to the world, and now the pillar of my freedom. He rested his elbows on the desk and rubbed his eyes. The idea of a forged marriage still seemed absurd, but the contract was signed and the plan was advancing. I just need her to accept. I just need him to smile and pretend. After that, everyone goes their separate ways. The phone rang. It was the driver, confirming that Harry had already been instructed for the next day. Gregory responded coldly. Great. Keep everything as agreed. On the other side of the city, Harry was sitting on some steps, holding the folded contract in his worn pocket. He observed children running in the square and elderly people talking on a bench. He seemed disconnected from that world, as if carrying a secret that distanced him from everything. He touched his fingers over the paper and sighed. Is this what my life has become? A paper signed out of desperation. She got up slowly, walking along the sidewalk with thoughtful steps. Maybe I don't have a choice anymore, maybe. Maybe it's better than remaining invisible. At the end of the day, Gregory reviewed the sequence of events in the plan again. He ordered the house staff to line up, review the reception, organize a plausible excuse for Harry's arrival. Everything was timed. While speaking on the phone with the ceremony coordinator, he repeated the words with precision. The event will be discreet, no guests, just the ceremony and some records. Nothing more. Then he hung up and opened the drawer again, staring at the check that would be delivered after the wedding. Let this stay between us, Harry, and may my grandmother never find out. Night fell over the mansion, and in the upstairs bedroom, Martha was carefully folding her kitchen towels, already preparing for the next day. She didn't know yet, but her story was about to change forever, and even with her restless heart, she whispered softly before sleeping. I hope tomorrow's visitor brings light to this house. Gregory, on the other side of the mansion, observed his own image reflected in the mirror, with the tired expression of someone who plans not with love, but with coldness. Tomorrow marks the beginning of the end of this responsibility, and I will breathe freely again. 2 days passed in silence inside the mansion until Gregory decided to fulfill the next step of the plan. That morning, he entered Martha's room without even knocking, finding his grandmother sitting by the window, knitting with effort. She raised her eyes and smiled when she saw him. Before she could say anything, he spoke hurriedly. Today you're going to receive a visitor, an old acquaintance of mine. I thought it might do you good. Martha left the knitting on her lap, surprised. Really? What kind of acquaintance? Where do you know him from? Gregory looked away, going to the door. Someone who deserves a chance. Just be kind, as you've always been. And before she could ask more, he had already left, leaving her full of questions. Shortly after, Harry appeared in the mansion's garden, wearing clean clothes that Gregory had ordered delivered. His shoes were still simple, his hair barely combed, but there was dignity in his posture. Martha was sitting in her rocking chair, a closed book on the table beside her. Seeing the man approaching, she raised her eyebrows, confused, but smiled gently. Gregory watched them from afar, from the porch, and only nodded his head. Grandma, this is Harry. He'll be spending some time with you. I thought it would be good. Martha offered her trembling hand, which Harry held with respect. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope not to bother you. She laughed discreetly. Company is always welcome. It's been a long time since anyone visited me without ulterior motives. Gregory went back inside even before the conversation began. The first minutes between them were marked by silence and restrained gestures. Harry sat at the other end of the table, observing the garden while Martha resumed her knitting. Gradually, she began to make conversation, talking about flowers, spring, the smell of cake that had been baking weeks before. Harry responded with short phrases, trying not to seem out of place. However, there was a moment when she commented about her grandson. Gregory was a sweet boy. Now he seems so distant. He barely looks me in the eyes. Harry leaned slightly forward. Sometimes old pains make us build walls that are too high. Martha looked at him, surprised by his sensitivity. You speak like someone who knows loneliness well." In the days that followed, the conversations became more frequent and spontaneous. Harry began to appear every morning and stay until early afternoon. Martha started waiting for him on the porch, always with an extra chair beside hers. One day, while having tea, she began to tell him about her biggest dream. "I wanted a pastry shop. It even had a name, Vanilla Enchantments." Gregory never found it amusing. He said it would be a disaster. Harry slowly stirred the sugar in his cup. "Perhaps he never tasted your sweets with an open heart." She laughed sincerely. Perhaps he never had time to taste them. Harry, although hired, was beginning to approach with sincerity. He listened to everything attentively, asked questions, praised the lady's ideas, helped pick flowers, and even carried heavy objects for her. Gregory watched them from the office window but expressed nothing beyond impatience. The sooner this wedding happens, the sooner everything goes back to normal. One afternoon, Martha noticed something curious. While sewing a dish towel, her hands trembled less. She stopped, looked at Harry, and commented, "Can you believe I haven't dropped anything today? This hasn't happened in a long time." He smiled with gentle eyes. "Perhaps what your hands needed was sincere company." Gregory began monitoring the time Harry spent with his grandmother, and even without showing it, he was bothered by the naturalness with which the two interacted. One night, he commented coldly while closing the document folder, "He's too comfortable. Let him not forget what's at stake." However, Martha seemed more alive. The tremors visibly decreased when she talked or walked with Harry through the garden. She herself noticed it one afternoon while holding a cup firmly. "This is unbelievable. Not even the doctor could make this tea stay still in my hand like this." Harry looked at her seriously. Sometimes what the body needs is someone who sees the soul. The affection between them developed unhurriedly. Harry never overstepped boundaries, but the respect he showed gradually transformed into admiration. He listened to cake recipes as if they were stories of heroes, observed the wrinkles on her face with tenderness, and whenever she spoke of the past, he asked questions with genuine interest. During one of these conversations, Martha said something that deeply touched him. "I know Gregory brought you here with some purpose, but for the first time in a long time I feel important to someone." Harry didn't respond immediately. He just gently squeezed her hand. Later, alone, he muttered to himself, "He will never understand what he's missing." One day, while Martha was watering the hydrangeas, Gregory left the house and passed by them without stopping, only saying that the ceremony was scheduled for a week from then. She was confused, not understanding what he meant, and looked at Harry for an explanation. He didn't have the courage to reveal anything and just looked away. Martha, with the watering can in hand, asked softly, "A ceremony, what is he talking about?" Harry tried to smile. "Perhaps some kind of tribute. Gregory has strange ways of surprising people." She nodded, but her expression became thoughtful. She had already learned not to fully trust her grandson's gestures. That same day, while returning home, Harry stopped at the entrance and observed the mansion for a long time before ringing the doorbell. He was thinking about how he had entered there with one objective, and now found himself involved with feelings he hadn't expected. When Martha opened the door with a smile and offered a piece of apple pie, he couldn't refuse. They sat in the living room and she commented with sparkling eyes, "You gave me back something I didn't even know I had lost." He swallowed the cake slowly and responded without hesitation, "And you showed me that I can still build something, even if it's from nothing." That night, Gregory was calling suppliers and organizing the legal details of the wedding, impatient with how long everything was taking. Looking at the photo of his grandmother with Harry in the garden, posted by a house employee, he shook his head, irritated. If he starts getting too emotional, I'll have to remind him of his role. But even with this silent threat, something inside him seemed restless. The serenity on his grandmother's face in the images didn't match what he always claimed to feel for her. However, he pushed the thought away. Feelings don't pay bills. This is business, nothing more. On the other side of the house, Martha was closing her recipe book with a discreet smile. For the first time in years, she felt she wasn't alone. And without knowing what lay ahead, she thought in a low voice, "Perhaps there's still time to dream." In the early hours of the morning, staff were rushing through the mansion, arranging flowers, adjusting fabrics, and carefully positioning chairs in the central garden. The decoration was elegant, discreet, with light tones and arrangements of white roses surrounding the improvised altar. A small group of journalists positioned themselves near the entrance, confused about the event, since Gregory, known for avoiding intimate exposures, rarely allowed the press to be present in personal matters. Jacob arrived shortly after, observing the preparations with a suspicious expression. Upon finding Gregory at the side of the house, he said in a firm tone, "Are you really going to turn this into a spectacle? I hope you know what you're getting into." Gregory adjusted his shirt cuffs and responded without emotion, "I'm just doing what's best for everyone, including her." Martha was prepared with care. She wore a soft blue dress, her hair styled with natural flowers, and an antique necklace that belonged to her mother. She seemed nervous but serene at the same time. Her hands still trembled, but less than before. Looking at herself in the mirror, she smiled emotionally. "I never imagined getting married again, and much less at this stage of life." A staff member was adjusting the hem of the dress when Harry appeared at the door. Seeing him, Martha paused for a moment. He wore a simple suit, but it was clean, neat, with a flower pinned to the lapel. "You look handsome, Harry, really. I don't even know what to say." He entered with slow steps, holding a small envelope in his inside pocket. "Today, everything will be told, Martha. Today, I will tell the truth." A few minutes later, everyone was gathered in the garden. The press kept their cameras positioned, whispering about the identity of the groom. Some wondered if Gregory was secretly getting married. Others bet it would be a masked corporate event. When Martha appeared, accompanied by Harry, the murmurs increased. Gregory, standing next to the officiant, observed everything expressionlessly. Jacob crossed his arms a few meters away, attentive to every gesture. Martha, with sparkling eyes, walked slowly to the altar. Harry offered his arm. She accepted with gratitude. "I never thought I would be here today, Harry, but somehow, it feels right." He looked at her firmly. "And that's why I need to be honest now." The ceremony began with traditional phrases, and the officiant tried to maintain a solemn tone. Gregory glanced at his watch discreetly, as if wanting to end it quickly. Jacob kept his eyes fixed on Martha's grandson, suspicious of the cold silence. When it came time for the vows, Harry stepped forward, took a deep breath and raised his hand. "Before saying anything, I need to tell everyone something." The officiant hesitated but gave him space. Martha looked at him confused. Gregory discreetly clenched his fists. Harry turned to the audience, facing the attentive eyes of the press. "The reason I'm here today began with an agreement, a contract, a payment." Silence fell over the garden like a dense fog. The photographers looked at each other, ready to capture every word. Harry continued without averting his gaze. "Gregory paid me to marry his grandmother. It was he who took me off the streets, who wrote the contract, who said it would be better this way. At first I accepted out of hunger, out of necessity, but then everything changed." He put his hand in the inner pocket of his jacket and took out the check. He extended it toward Gregory. "Here is what you promised me. I don't want it, because what I found with Martha is priceless." Gregory tried to advance, but Jacob held him back with a slight nod. "Not now." Martha brought her hand to her mouth in shock. Her expression oscillated between pain and relief. Harry looked at her, his eyes watery. "From the first day I knew you were different. Even trembling, even being treated as a nuisance, you had light in your eyes. And every time you told me about the bakery, about the cakes, about your life, I saw more than just a role in a contract." Gregory, red with anger, tried to justify himself. "It was for her own good. I wanted to give her company, wanted to give her comfort. No one else did that for her." Jacob looked at him with contempt. "No one else tried to get rid of her like discarding a weight. Is that what you call care?" The press, now closer, recorded everything. Harry turned to the altar, handed the check to the officiant, and looked at Martha with a firm voice. "I am here for you. Not for the money, not for the contract. I choose you, Martha, because you made me remember who I was." She had eyes full of tears, but she didn't break down. She walked up to him, ignoring the looks around, and held his hands firmly. "You are the first man who looked at me as a person, the first who listened to my story without rushing." They looked at each other in silence. Gregory moved away, humiliated in front of everyone. The officiant, not knowing how to proceed, just waited. Martha turned to the improvised audience and spoke with a trembling but determined voice. "For years, I was ignored in my own home. My grandson saw me as a burden. But this man saw me. He treated me with respect. Jacob stepped forward, approaching the altar. Martha, if you want, this wedding can continue. And this time, without contracts, just truth. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Yes, I want to, because now I know what it's like to be truly loved. Harry just smiled. Then let's continue, but this time, for the two of us. With the ceremony resumed, the mood changed. The initial tension gave way to a silent commotion. The press recorded every gesture with renewed attention. Gregory, now on the sidelines, watched everything without knowing what to do. Jacob approached him, whispering, "The truth always finds a way to come to light." And today, it found its way at the altar. Gregory turned his face, trying to maintain some dignity, but the damage was already done. His image would be headline news in the next day's papers, and for the first time, he felt that he no longer controlled anything. As the vows were exchanged, with simple and sincere words, Martha and Harry kept their hands intertwined. The wind swayed the veils, the flowers seemed more alive. In the end, the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. There were no fireworks, no rehearsed applause, just a respectful silence and a feeling of truth filling the air. Jacob approached the two and shook their hands, smiling with respect. "Congratulations. You did more than just a marriage. You taught what real love is." Martha squeezed Harry's hand tenderly. "I have never felt so respected, so alive." Gregory was the first to leave the venue. He walked through the gate without looking back. His steps were quick but heavy. Inside the car, he sank into the seat and closed his eyes. He knew the damage was irreversible. The contract, the attempt to manipulate the situation. Everything had been exposed before the cameras. Meanwhile, at the mansion, Martha and Harry received sincere hugs from the few guests present. There weren't many, but all were moved. Jacob, standing next to the central tree, observed the two with discreet satisfaction. He thought about how sometimes the most twisted plans could reveal more beautiful truths. He wanted to erase her story, but ended up being the spark to rekindle it. The morning after the wedding, news portals talked about nothing else. Headlines displayed the image of Harry with the check in his hand and Gregory with a defeated expression. Videos of the ceremony went viral in minutes, and morning shows discussed in acidic tones the scandal involving a millionaire heir who tried to use his own grandmother to escape a responsibility. Gregory woke up to incessant notifications on his phone, and upon opening the first company reports, he saw the immediate impact. Plummeting stocks, messages from investors asking for clarification, and customers questioning the integrity of the leadership. He threw his phone on the table and muttered, irritated, "All because of that beggar. He ruined everything." Jacob arrived at the company around mid-morning, already aware of the repercussions, and found Gregory with a tense expression, sweeping reports off the table with his hand. "Satisfied, Jacob? Now we're a national joke. Want me to smile for the cameras too?" Jacob remained calm despite the explosive tone. "Don't blame me, you created this circus. You hired a man to deceive your own family and thought you'd come out as a hero." Gregory took 2 steps and approached his partner. "You could have prevented it, could have helped me contain this, but you preferred to applaud the scene." Jacob looked fixedly into his eyes. "I applauded the truth, and the public did the same. Now you need to deal with the consequences." Meanwhile, Martha and Harry were leaving the mansion for the first time since the ceremony. Instead of a luxurious trip, he took her to a modest chalet in a nearby mountain region where the cold required scarves and the silence was interrupted only by the sounds of trees in the wind. Martha, sitting in an armchair near the fireplace, looked around with enchantment. "This reminds me of my youth. My mother and I used to come to a place like this and make cakes with local fruits." Harry brought a basket with fresh bread and hot tea and sat down beside her. "You can still do all that. That pastry shop. It can still exist, Martha." She sighed and smiled. "Is it possible after everything?" In the afternoon of the second day, the two sat at a small wooden table with papers scattered across it. Martha drew calmly, her strokes still a bit shaky, but much firmer than before. She was sketching the facade of a store with the name she had never forgotten, Vanilla Enchantments. Harry observed in silence, touched by her dedication. "You already have the name, you already have the recipes. and now you have someone who believes in you." She stopped drawing for a moment and looked into his eyes. "You are the first person who truly believed in me. Not even my grandson would look at these drawings." He smiled, lightly touching her hand. He lost the chance to see this happen. On the other side of the city, Gregory watched, perplexed, a news report showing Martha smiling in front of the chalet next to Harry. It was a brief interview where she talked about her desire to open a pastry shop and how she finally felt alive. He turned off the television forcefully, threw the remote on the sofa, and began to walk in circles. "She's playing with my surname. How dare she?" As if everything were a great achievement. He picked up the phone, called Jacob, and spoke without breathing. "Did you see the report? She's going to open a store as if she came out victorious." Jacob responded firmly. "And what's wrong with that? She deserves this. For the first time, she owns her own story." Gregory didn't respond immediately. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He felt something he couldn't name. Part of it was anger, part was guilt, but above all there was a feeling of exclusion. It was as if they had taken his grandmother from his hands and placed her on a pedestal he couldn't reach. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. "If she goes ahead with this store, she'll expose my name even more. It will look like I'm the villain of the story, the grandson who tried to silence an old lady with a forced marriage." Jacob responded without hesitation. "It's not a matter of looking like it. That's exactly what you did. And now you need to decide if you're going to learn from it, or keep digging your own downfall." The next morning at the cottage, Martha appeared with a recipe notebook in hand, still with the old embroidered fabric cover. She sat next to Harry and began to show, one by one, her favorite creations. "This is the apple cake my mother used to make when someone was sad. This is the chocolate one I always wanted to sell, and this was what I wanted to prepare for Gregory on his birthday." Harry listened attentively without interrupting. When she finished, he stood up and said, smiling, "Let's turn this into something real. You've waited too long for permission. Now it's time to act." Martha nodded, moved. "I think, with you by my side, I can do anything." Back at the company, Gregory gathered his assistants and began making notes about permits, sanitary requirements, and municipal regulations. He was determined to make each step involving the possible opening of the bakery difficult. Jacob, seeing the movement, entered his office and crossed his arms. "I can't believe you're really going down this path. You're going to try to sabotage a lady over 70 years old?" Gregory raised his head, defiant. "She used my name. She embarrassed my image. This isn't about cakes, it's about control." Jacob approached the desk. "You didn't lose control, Gregory. You gave it away. When you treated your grandmother like a burden, you lost the right to decide what she does with the freedom she gained." That same night, in front of the cottage fireplace, Martha was finishing writing the last recipe in the notebook. She closed it carefully and rested her hands on the cover. Harry served 2 cups of tea and sat next to her in silence. "I don't think I ever imagined I would have a second chance, much less alongside someone like you." Harry, without taking his eyes off her, responded with sincerity. "And I never imagined that a cold contract would end up leading me to the truest thing I've ever experienced." She rested her head on his shoulder, peaceful. "Let's open this store. And when the doors open, I want everyone to know that my story is just beginning." The next morning, back at the mansion, Harry and Martha began organizing the first steps. They talked to old suppliers and visited a small commercial spot that she had known for years, but never had the courage to rent. When they signed the first intention papers, Martha could hardly believe it. Harry held her hand and said firmly, "We're going to build this, step by step. And no matter who tries to stop it, you will succeed." She smiled with teary eyes. "Gregory may try to stop us, but this time he no longer has power over me." And then, both looked at the empty space and imagined there the beginning of a new life. 2 weeks later, the sign was carefully hung over the light wooden entrance. "Vanilla Enchantments." The golden letters gleamed under the soft morning light. Inside the small bakery, the final adjustments were being made. The showcases were filled with pies, cakes, and cookies, all prepared by Martha, with Harry's attentive help. She wore a flowery apron and was arranging a tray of cupcakes when the first customer entered. Outside, cameras and microphones were positioned. The local press had been invited to record the day. Let's do this our way, Harry. If it's going to work, it will be with love and truth. He smiled, holding the door. Today is the first day of our new life, and no one is going to stop us. The journalist circulated through the environment with respect, enchanted by the welcoming atmosphere and the simplicity of the couple. Martha answered questions with sweetness, and Harry spoke little but firmly. Jacob arrived in the middle of the morning, surprising them both. He wore casual clothes and brought a gift box. Upon entering, he greeted both with a handshake. "I came to taste the famous cakes of Mrs. Martha, and also to talk about possibilities." Harry guided him to a table, and Martha brought a slice of apple pie. "It was always my best dessert, but today it tastes like victory." Jacob tasted it, closed his eyes, and nodded. "You know, the success of my company can come from unexpected places. I'm considering investing here." On the other side of the city, Gregory watched the live broadcast on the television in his room. The images showed Martha smiling while serving coffee to customers. Harry appeared in the background, collecting plates and cleaning tables. Jacob gave a brief interview, praising the strength of the initiative. Gregory turned off the television with a dry click and stared at the blank screen for a few seconds. His stomach felt queasy, as if something that still belonged to him had been invaded. She should be resting, not showing off. "This is a circus built on my name." He got up abruptly and went to his desk. "If you think you're going to turn my grandmother into a celebrity, you're very mistaken." The next day, during a meeting with shareholders, Gregory was pressured by declining numbers and poorly explained decisions. They questioned the company's image, now tarnished by public exposure and scandal. One of them, more direct, looked Gregory in the eye and said clearly, "You created an unnecessary crisis. Instead of protecting the company's name, you fueled a conflict that now harms us." Gregory tried to defend himself, claiming it was a personal matter. But another shareholder coldly retorted, "Personal matters that reach the press cease to be personal. And now, while your grandmother grows, we shrink." Gregory left the meeting with a tense jaw. "If they want war, they'll get it. I just need to act from the shadows." That same week, the first strange signs began to appear in the bakery's routine. An inspector showed up with questions about documentation, claiming an anonymous complaint. Suppliers began delaying deliveries without explanations. A large sugar order never arrived. Martha, worried, tried to reorganize the stock, but realized something strange was happening. Harry began monitoring every call. "Something's wrong. Someone is trying to sabotage us here." Martha looked at him with hands on her apron. "Could Gregory do something like this?" Harry responded with regret. "He's done worse. Let's not wait for his next move." At the company headquarters, Gregory spoke on the phone with short, dry phrases. He gave instructions cautiously, demanding secrecy. He had hired an intermediary to hinder the bakery's operations without exposing himself. Everything should appear coincidental. After hanging up, he sat at his desk and opened a folder with the shop's documents. He was obsessed with every detail, studying ways to weaken the business. "They think they can defeat me with flour and sugar? I'll show them how the real world works." He spent the night redoing calculations and sketching strategies to hinder Martha's operation. If she falls in silence and without blaming me. Meanwhile, at the bakery, Martha and Harry responded with creativity to the obstacles. When a supplier failed, they improvised with local ingredients. When inspectors arrived, they presented everything in order. The loyal public continued to visit. Many already knew their story and enthusiastically defended the place. Jacob reappeared at the end of a busy afternoon and sat with them. "It seems someone doesn't want you to grow, but it also seems you won't stop." Martha looked at the oven where a cake was baking and responded firmly, "For many years, I let them silence me. Now, my voice comes through the smell of sugar." Harry added, "And whoever tries to erase that smell has already lost." The following weekend, the bakery organized a small social initiative, free cakes for children in the area. It was Martha's idea, who said that sweetness should reach those who need joy. The initiative attracted more press attention and generated positive comments on social media. Gregory, seeing another report about the entrepreneur grandmother, clenched his fists and violently closed his laptop. He picked up the phone and made a new call. "Starting tomorrow, I want you to increase the pressure. Make it seem like the business is illegal, dirty, anything, but I want that place empty. On the other side of the line, someone confirmed. Gregory put down the phone and thought aloud, "If I can't erase the past, I'll bury her present." The next morning, Martha found an anonymous note under the bakery door with veiled threats. Harry collected the paper and immediately tore it up. "He's getting desperate, and the more desperate, the more predictable." Martha observed him with a serious face. "I think he doesn't just want to destroy the shop. He wants to destroy me, as if I were a disgrace." Harry held her hands firmly. "He's afraid of you, Martha. Afraid of what you represent. Freedom, courage, and truth." She took a deep breath, looking at the street through the shop window. "Then he better prepare himself, because we won't back down now." With the bakery crowded in the following days, the sabotage attempts lost strength in the face of popular support. Jacob scheduled a new meeting with Martha and Harry and brought a clear proposal. "I want to formalize a financial investment. This bakery will be more than a shop. It will be a symbol of overcoming, and Gregory will have no place in this future." Martha, with discreet tears in her eyes, accepted. "We're not doing this for revenge, we're doing it for everything that was denied to me." Harry looked at the clock, then at the crowded showcase. "So let's start again. But now, with the right allies." And from there, the bakery grew not only in size but in significance. On a quiet Tuesday morning, Harry noticed that the usual delivery of eggs and butter had not arrived. He thought at first it was a common delay, but upon checking the list, he noticed it was the third supplier in a row that failed to fulfill their agreement. He picked up the phone and called one of those responsible directly. The voice on the other end was nervous, evasive. After some insistence, they released an uncomfortable phrase. "We received pressure from above, from someone with a lot of power. Better not to get involved anymore." Harry pressed the phone against his ear and responded firmly. "If they're trying to stop us, they've chosen the wrong path." Martha, overhearing the conversation, dropped the glass bowl she was carrying. The tremors returned suddenly, stronger than in recent days. She sat down slowly in a nearby chair, trying to control her breathing. Harry rushed to her, carefully holding her hands. "Calm down. It will pass. I'm here with you." Martha looked at him with teary eyes, her voice breaking. "I thought we had overcome everything, Harry, but it seems he won't stop." Harry crouched in front of her, fixing his gaze on hers. He still hasn't understood that he can't control us anymore, but he'll learn. That afternoon, Jacob showed up at the bakery without warning. He sensed the heavy atmosphere as soon as he crossed the door. Harry took him to the back and explained what was happening. He talked about the suppliers, the phone calls, and Martha's reaction. Jacob listened to everything carefully, his face serious. "Are you sure someone is behind this, someone specific?" Harry crossed his arms firmly. "I can't prove it yet, but I'm certain it's Gregory. He's behind this, manipulating everything as he always did." Jacob breathed deeply, shaking his head. "If it really is him, he's not just being cruel, he's being stupid." On the other side of town, Gregory was alone in his office, drinking cold coffee and looking at incomplete reports. He knew his influence was being questioned. When Jacob entered, he immediately stood up with an irritated expression. "Come to give me another moral lesson, or have you decided to endorse Grandma's cakes?" Jacob didn't react to the sarcasm. He just said what he needed to. "Things have gone too far. If this continues, not even the partners will stand by your side." Gregory walked to the window, his tone acidic. "You're on the wrong side, Jacob. You're defending someone who used my name to grow." Jacob responded without hesitation. "I'm on the side of truth and you're digging your own end." That same night, Gregory made one last call. He spoke in a low, direct voice, using words that made the tone of the instruction clear. He asked someone to go to the bakery during the night and ensure that some equipment was disabled. Nothing major, just enough to disrupt. After hanging up, he walked to the mirror and stared at himself for long seconds. They will learn that challenging Gregory comes with a price. Meanwhile, at the bakery, Harry was reviewing the camera system and reinforcing the locks. He suspected something bigger was coming. If he really does this, he'll leave traces. And this time, he'll pay completely. The following night, a hooded figure forced entry through the back of the bakery. He advanced quickly but with little skill. He tried to tamper with the power panel, then with the kitchen equipment. He didn't notice, however, that all cameras had been relocated by Harry. The system recorded each step of the intruder in high definition. In the morning, upon arriving and seeing the damaged lock, Harry knew he was right. He carefully collected the images, copied the files, and immediately called the police. "I have recordings of an attempted break-in, and I know who's behind it." Martha appeared at the door, worried. "It was him, wasn't it?" Harry confirmed with a look. "And now he's going to fall." With the evidence in hand, the police confirmed the identity of the intruder, an employee linked to Gregory's company. Jacob was called, watched the videos in silence, and nodded. "It's more than enough." He gathered all the partners that same morning and presented the material without beating around the bush. He showed the faces, the records, the times. He explained how the sabotage was directly linked to Gregory's recent behavior. One of the older partners said in a firm tone, "He put everyone at risk. This is no longer an internal matter. It's a real threat." Jacob concluded the presentation by saying, "We need to act, and act now." At the bakery, Martha looked at the turned-off ovens, the stacked chairs, and the temporary notice on the door. The decision to close for a day had been difficult but necessary. She was afraid of losing everything they had achieved. Harry entered with 2 coffees and sat beside her. "Everything is under control. The police are handling it, and Jacob has done his part." Martha held the mug with both hands, trying to contain the slight tremor. "What if he manages to escape again? What if he finds another way to attack us?" Harry looked into her eyes firmly. "Now it's not just the 2 of us anymore. Now he's messed with people who can stop him." In the late afternoon, Gregory learned about the urgently convened assembly. He realized, even before confirming, that something had escaped his control. He tried to call 2 of the partners, but no one answered. Outside, as night fell, Martha turned on the light in the pastry shop's display window. Even though the store was closed, Harry observed in silence, respecting the gesture. She turned to him and said firmly, "Even if everything is lost tomorrow, I want people to know we didn't give up." Harry walked over to her, held her hand, and responded with his gaze fixed on hers. "Nothing will be lost, because now the truth is on our side." And for the first time in days, they both knew the fight was near its end, and that this time, Gregory would have nowhere else to run. The next morning, the company's meeting room was packed. The partners positioned themselves around the table, their faces bearing contained indignation. Gregory entered with rigid posture, as if he still had some control over the situation. Jacob was the first to stand up. With documents in hand, he initiated the formal vote. In minutes, the decision was unanimous. Gregory was removed from all positions. Not a single vote in his defense. The silence was broken only by Jacob's voice. The company can no longer be led by someone who acts against the very principles he claims to defend. Gregory remained motionless, then just murmured, "You'll regret this." After Gregory's departure, Jacob summoned the press and announced an unexpected measure. The company would make a significant investment in Martha's pastry shop, acknowledging the damage caused and publicly supporting a business based on truth and resilience. The gesture was applauded even by the most critical journalists. Jacob emphasized the importance of restoring the company's image with concrete actions, not excuses. This investment is not just financial, it's a symbol, a way of showing that we made mistakes and want to fix them. Behind the scenes, the move generated immediate positive repercussions. The pastry shop officially became the new symbol of rebirth in that story. Outside the headquarters, Gregory left the building with heavy steps. There was no team, no car, no defined destination. When he arrived at the mansion, he found correspondence on the living room table, an eviction notice. The accumulated debt, cut sponsorships, and lack of income made his stay there unfeasible. He threw the letter on the floor and looked around. The furniture, the paintings, the walls, everything seemed more distant now. He sat on the couch and murmured to himself, "What was it all for? Nothing left for me." The next morning he departed carrying 2 suitcases, being observed by neighbors who avoided his gaze. The destination, a small apartment in an ordinary neighborhood. For the first time, Gregory was just a name among many. While he descended in the elevator with lowered eyes, on the other side of the city, the pastry shop prepared for a new inauguration, now with a renovated structure. The display windows shone, the facade had been repainted, and the sign gleamed even more. Martha wore her favorite apron and smiled as she hadn't smiled in many years. Harry organized the final details alongside Jacob, who remained discreet but attentive. Lines formed on the sidewalk, and reporters waited with cameras pointed at the entrance. When the doors opened, the reception was warm. "Welcome to the place where dreams are reborn," said Martha, opening her arms. Harry whispered in her ear, "Today the whole world is seeing who you've always been." News of the reopening was featured on portals and TV programs, while Gregory watched everything from the old television in his new apartment. Sitting in a simple chair, with dim light and a haggard face, he followed the images without being able to turn it off. He saw Martha distributing cake slices, Harry smiling at customers, and Jacob delivering a symbolic gift to the couple. No mention of him, no memory. The exclusion was complete. He leaned his head against the wall and murmured with a hoarse voice, "They erased me as if I had never been part of it." But deep down, he knew he had excluded himself long before it all began. A few days later, while sweeping the sidewalk of the pastry shop before opening, Martha saw Gregory standing across the street. He was thinner, with an unshaven beard and hands in his coat pockets. He didn't approach, he just observed. She crossed the street calmly and stopped in front of him. For seconds, neither said anything, until Gregory, in a low voice, asked, "Are you well?" Martha responded with tenderness, "I'm happy." He nodded, with tears welling in his eyes. "That's what I wanted. I just didn't know how to do it." The tears came silently, with no effort to contain them. Harry observed from a distance, standing by the pastry shop door, respecting the moment. Martha said goodbye to Gregory with a brief touch on his arm and returned to the other side of the street. Upon entering, she sat in the chair next to the counter and took off her apron for a moment. Harry sat beside her and held her hand. "Want to talk about it?" She smiled, but with sadness in her eyes. "I don't hold grudges. I just regret that he never accepted the love he always received." Harry pressed his forehead against hers and spoke sweetly. "Now you have a new story, and it's being written with your own hands." At the end of that week, Jacob appeared with a bag in hand. Inside, a special cake made by Martha, now the best-selling item in the store. It was a discreet celebration among friends, but full of meaning. They sat at the back table, and Jacob raised a slice before tasting it. "I never thought I'd eat something like this in a place I've financed with such satisfaction." Martha laughed, adjusting the tray on the tablecloth. "I never thought I'd be on the other side of the counter owning all this," Harry completed with a smile. "And to think it all started with a meaningless contract." Jacob looked at both of them and said, seriously, "You transformed a mistake into a miracle." After coffee, Harry suggested a new idea. He took Martha's old recipe notebook and placed it on the table. "What if we published this? A book with recipes, stories, memories." Martha opened the notebook delicately, her eyes illuminated by the proposal. "Each recipe has a story, some sad, others sweet, but all true." Jacob was already making mental notes. "We can handle the publication. It will be more than a book, it will be a legacy." Harry nodded. "It's no longer just about selling cakes. Here it's about leaving something for the world, something that cannot be erased." And as customers entered the bakery again, smiling, talking, and enchanted by the sweet aroma in the air, Martha looked around with gratitude. The store, once a distant dream, was now a living reality. Harry washed baking pans at the counter. Jacob jotted down ideas for the book launch. And across the street, Gregory started walking again, alone, disappearing among the shadows of the buildings. But that afternoon, inside the bakery, there was only room for what was true, simple, and meaningful. And Martha, now stronger than ever, whispered to herself, "This is the story I always wanted to tell." Months later, the main bookstore's window in downtown caught attention with a single highlight: Grandma Martha's Recipes. The cover showed Martha's serene face holding an apple pie, the same one from the bakery, surrounded by drawings of her original notes. With support from the publisher recommended by Jacob, the book reached the shelves as a symbol of resilience, affection, and memory. During the launch, the line wrapped around the block and customers held copies with emotion. Martha signed with delicacy, telling each person that there was more than recipes there. Each page is a living memory, and every memory has a flavor. The expansion of the bakery was inevitable. The name became a registered trademark, and the demand for sweets grew every week. Harry and Martha chose a new location in the same city, a larger space with an area dedicated to children. There, the little ones could learn simple recipes, hear stories, and take their own little cakes home. At the inauguration of the new branch, Martha looked around and said quietly to Harry, "I never thought I'd come so far, and it all started with a shaky cake batter." Harry laughed and responded with affection. Shaky or not, it supported a revolution. In a simple office without wide windows, Gregory worked in silence. He worked as a consultant for small businesses, using his experience to try to guide beginning entrepreneurs. The desk was organized, but without any trace of personality. When turning on the television to fill the silence, he came across an interview with Martha. She was talking about the book, the new branch, and the public's affection. Gregory couldn't watch for long. He lowered his head, turned off the device, and remained silent. She did everything without me, or perhaps despite me. Regret spread like a weight on his shoulders. That same afternoon, Gregory found a small box on his desk upon returning from lunch. It was wrapped in simple paper, without a sender. On top, the bakery's logo, Grandma Martha's Recipes. He picked it up slowly, as if he knew what to find inside. Upon opening it, the smell of fresh cake immediately spread throughout the room. Inside was a carefully wrapped slice, accompanied by a note with just 2 words: "To remember." Gregory closed his eyes and brought the piece to his mouth. The taste was exactly as he remembered from childhood. Tears came without effort. She still offered me, even after everything. Outside the new branch, dozens of children played and got messy with chocolate. Harry organized cooking workshops, while Martha told stories aloud to a group gathered around colorful cushions. The pastry shop had become more than a business. It was now a place of collective affection. Loyal customers would enter with ready smiles. Others left notes thanking them for the memories that the flavors awakened. Martha, seeing all this, commented to Harry, "The kitchen became my voice, and the book, my second chance." He hugged her with pride in his gaze. "Now the whole world hears you, Martha." At the end of that day, Gregory walked by the new branch unnoticed. He stopped across the street and observed for a few minutes. He saw a child running with a gingerbread in hand, heard laughter, and caught a glimpse of Martha with her flowery apron, smiling as always. He didn't have the courage to approach. He just muttered to himself, "This is what she wanted to give me, and I didn't want it." After a few minutes, he turned and walked away, slow steps, head down. He knew that world was now inaccessible to him. And perhaps it was fair that way. Back in his small apartment, Gregory locked the door and dropped his keys on the table. The silence was thick. He sat down slowly on the couch, stared at the empty envelope from the cake box, and rested his elbows on his knees. For a long time he remained motionless with his eyes fixed on nothing. The smell of the sweet still lingered in the air, a reminder of what he had lost. He thought about everything that could have been different and whispered to himself, "She just wanted to be remembered, and I made her feel forgotten." And for the first time in a long time, he stayed there, with nothing more to say. Did you like Gregory and Martha's story? Then subscribe to the channel. Comment which city you're watching this beautiful story from. Leave your like and check out the next one that's waiting for you here on screen. I'll see you there.